That was the right jingle. Those other jingles, those were the pre-jingle jingles. So, oh, look at that. Oh, it's a disco otter. Good. So this is, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with some of the reputation tools that we have in the industry, but there is one called Otter Space, and there's one called Disco, and then there's Orange Protocol. So anyway, it's not, I got them all in there. It's orange, it's got an otter, it's a disco. We're set. So this is, how many of you have been to my talks before? A few of you. So you know that part of the time you're going to talk. And we've got a runner here. I think his name is Oren. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it. And he may have to run a little bit more than usual because even though I'm the smartest person in the room, all of you are also the smartest person in the room. So I like to make it a little interactive and more like a workshop because reputation, why are we talking about it anyway? I don't know, should I go to this event? Right? Like, it's been being run by one of the bankless guys. At the bottom it says IYKYK. I'm like, I don't know, maybe not for women, maybe yes for women. There's something he knows that I'm supposed to know that I don't know. So reputation in the real world is like a real thing. Like, this could be a good event, this could be a sleazy event, this could be a mixed event, it could be guys only event, I don't know. The spa looks really nice, so that's why we're talking about reputation. And reputation is one of those things is when you bring it up, people are like, you shouldn't talk about it, it's too complex, nobody's ever solved it, blah, 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 which is all true. But, nevertheless, we're going to talk about why you might want it anyhow. We're going to talk about proof of personhood, because a lot of the reputation things we've got now are just proof that you're a person, which is really different from your reputation. On-chain versus off-chain, issuance versus interpretation, some of the tools that you could actually use, and assessing your project needs, which I think that last one we're just going to kind of do it throughout. How many people here are actually hacking? None of you. So, oh, you're hacking. All right, cool. So you may have specific projects. It would be good if, as we go through this, you actually think of a specific project that either you're working on or you're interested in that needs reputation in some way, because it'll be more fun to actually think about the practicalities of it in that context. And then when I say stuff or ask you to say stuff, which will happen, you'll have something to say because you'll be thinking of a particular use case. It just could be your favorite use case. All right, so why do we need reputation? And there's a whole bunch of reasons that we might need reputation. And some of them are really only in the digital world. Like Sybil attacks they're really hard to do in the physical world, because it's like, oh, here I am, and like, I'm here, I'm not somewhere else. And I also find it a little weird that we're still doing them in the physical world, because Google knows very well exactly where I am right now. It also knows what I'm saying, I suppose. And so, there's some weirdness about the fact that we're constantly checking that you are who you are, given that your phone knows exactly where you are and what you're doing and how you act, and if you've got a limp, and like, it amazes me that even though we've got so much surveillance, we still don't know it's you when you're on the computer. It's very bizarre to me. But anyway, gating is another use, which means I might have some privileges that I want to give to people, but only the right people. I might want to let you into a certain area of my whatever event. I've got, like, this is a gating mechanism, right? There's certain places I can go through. But if you're also thinking about, okay, well, are you really part of my DAO? Do I want to allow you to make proposals in my DAO or not? Are you actually qualified? Do you deliver on time? So allowing people or not allowing people to perform certain actions. Uniqueness of individuals. There's some debate about that. In the real world, you can kind of fake being somebody, but you want to know that somebody's not voting multiple times or pretending to be who they're not, or that it's actually a unique individual. You might want to weigh people's influence. So if you're making a decision about how to do the messaging, or you're making a decision about who should be able to have certain equipment for chemicals or whatever, or whatever decision you're making, you may have experts, and the experts maybe have more influence, or if you're making a decision about a particular location, you would want to know that the people live there, maybe they get more weight. So weighting of the influence. Compensation is an obvious one. And it's also a tricky one. If you equate compensation and reputation, it's very problematic, and probably a lot of us in this industry have been paid in tokens that would also be used to weight our votes. So I recently have been on a supervisory council at the Singularity Net, and every month they pay me in tokens. And that's my salary, and I use it as my salary. So actually I have less votes than I should have, you might say, because I'm using them as money and not as voting. And it's extremely problematic if you don't have a lot of spare cash to be, or if all of your salary is coming in tokens, how much weight do you have? So when you start to mix reputation and tokens, it gets very weird. But somebody's reputation, it's like if you knew all of the tokens that I had earned versus all the ones I had bought over time, which you could tell on chain, you might be like, oh, this person actually has done more work here. So compensation could be part of it. Assessment of competency. So like I was mentioning, you might want to know that somebody is really competent at something before you award them money for something. You might want to know that they're competent if they're going to judge other proposals. Right now, we've got a mentoring session over there. It's like, how did they decide I was competent to be a mentor? I don't know. I mean, I said, can I be a mentor? And they said, yes. So, but my reputation apparently precedes me, or not. Content recommendation and assessment. We all know the problems of fake news and fake information, and like, who's saying this? Do they know what they're talking about? They sound really smart. And so reputation might be important to know, who are the experts? Who should I ask? And sometimes quite the opposite, like, who are the devil's advocates? Like, if I want somebody to give me a contrary opinion and Grace isn't around that day, who can I go to? So knowing who's an expert in what. Risk assessment and safety. So like my first example was about safety. So I think this is the, if I push this button, yeah. So for those who weren't here for the first one, this is like my safety example of like, should you go to this event? Okay, so let's talk about why reputation. So as I said when you came in, like maybe people are thinking of a particular project. Which of these instances of reputation are you guys interested in or are relevant to the projects you're thinking about? Who's got an example? Yeah. Wait for the runner. There's going to be a mic runner somewhere. Mic runner? Did you? Yeah. And you can pass it to the next person. Yeah.
Okay, it's weird to hear me. Okay. Assessment of competency. So we are building a peer-to-peer mentoring platform where ideally everyone can be a mentor, but how to build the reputation and at the same time assure quality of mentorship.
Right. And so there's a lot of aspects of reputation already you can hear. We want to make sure they're going to be a good mentor, but it's competency in a particular field. Like I can't help people write smart contracts, but I can help them with product market fit. Some people like nice mentors. Some people like blunt or, like just give it to me straight mentors. So there's a whole bunch of, kinds of mentors, and it might go both ways, right? It's like, I don't want to deal with a project with somebody who's whatever, something like that. Great. What other examples do people have of reputation? We got one up here. You're allowed to say your name so everybody will know who you are, or not, because if you want privacy.
Hi, this is Shandor, and I work closly with the decentralized storage. We are trying to build end-user applications on top of it. And if I look at the list here, gating, uniqueness of individuals, compensation is relevant to us. Okay, so what do you mean by gating? Like, what are you trying to gate? So, for example, if you store content on decentralized storage and you want to make it available to a group of people who is paying a subscription to you,
Okay, so that's interesting because gating in that case for content, if it's just payment, that's one thing, but it also might be like, well, if you volunteered at my organization, we want to make sure that whatever, and if you leave a lot of shitty comments, maybe we close you off.
And because it's a decentralized network, everything is publicly available, just like on a blockchain, so it becomes a challenge to provide this, but it seems we have a solution for it now.
Yeah, I mean, some of these are technical, like I've got to hold a credential, right, a reputation credential, and then you've got to hold a gate. In order to gate somebody, you do need a gate. It is true. Yeah.
Yeah, as an example, that there's a lot of decentralized venture capitals, like groups that pool money and then invest in new projects. And it's often very hard to know if you can actually trust these people. Like, are they legit? Are they really delivering the tokens, or is there scams involved? So.
Yeah, that's right. And there's different legit, right? Like some people are really good at increasing the price of their token, but they never deliver a product. You might be cool with that as an investor. Some people deliver a product, but they don't know anything about marketing. And you can also, it's really interesting, like some of the matching use cases, right? What if we had some sort of matching engine? It's like, I know how to write specifications, but I don't know how to code. They know how to code, but they don't know how to write a specification. You could have, but the multivalence of that type of reputation system, I mean, that's complex. And if you just think about this, even those of you who've never seen me before, if I just pause for a moment and you think of all the opinions you already have about me, like, how's my English? Am I smart? Am I, you have a list of opinions about me after, what are we at now? Less than 10 minutes, that a multivalent reputation system, it's like, right? And then some of the most important ones, like the first slide, is like, are they going to, be malicious in some way? And this is really the most salient thing. And one of the things that we're having a lot of trouble with, I've been designing some systems, and I had a mentor be honest with me, and they said the fidelity of the problem isn't high enough. Like if you think about the number of certificates you might have to give out in order to really understand for this use case who you're trusting, because there's 4 guys on the team and each one of them has a history, and maybe and if you've worked in Silicon Valley or Silicon Wadi like I have, you see that like my friend and I, we ran a service business. We would do business plan writing and technical writing. So we saw everybody come and go. Our business was in business longer than any of the startups we served. And our business was profitable from day one because it had to be, because it was a service business. And we used to laugh about like your qualification for raising $5 million is that you burned through $1 million last year. It's like, we ran a profitable business. Nobody would ever give us any venture capital because we hadn't proved we could burn through $1 million. We could only prove that we had earned a few $1 million every year. It was really problematic. So anyway, but the multivalence is really an issue. And if you think about that over time, and then also things like, did they do something wrong in the past and have they made up for it, and how far in the past it was. It's very complex, these type of matching engines. Other examples of people who are looking at reputation for their projects want to, here we go. I'm not hearing you, so maybe something's with the mic. Runner, back up. Runner, back up. All right, now we got reputation for each of the mic runners. It's still not working.
Yeah? Okay.
Oh, now it's running.
Can you hear me? Okay, awesome.
All right, now we know who the superior mic runner is. We can give him a certificate.
So I wanted to ask about compensation as well, because I run a company. We advise a lot of DAOs and protocols, and it gets really tricky with governance and exactly reputation. And one of the instances in which I would be really curious in is when you're getting compensated on-chain and it's clearly visible how much money you're making, it brings a lot of security risks, as essentially people know how much money you're getting, and they can easily trace it back to you, yet you want to be able to come in and show your track record, say your name, effectively bring your reputation in, but then it brings this risk of people knowing how much money you're getting, and so that's one of the security vectors. So that's one way that I would like to ask about how you see that getting resolved over time. Maybe ZK could be one of the ways in which you somehow prove your reputation, track record, and previous experience with relevant projects without revealing your actual identity, so then you're getting compensated in some meaningful way. And another way, exactly as you have mentioned, you're getting paid by many of these projects in tokens, right? Because everyone loves it. It aligns incentives for them. The cost basis is very little. But then as you're using it to pay your staff, to pay your people, to pay yourself, you're selling it, and so you're losing your voting weight. And one of the ways, for example, which we have advised, or somewhat the most feasible way of going forward with not just incentivizing people that have the capital to effectively buy their influence for voting, is to not just do it purely based on the amount of tokens they have, but instead of locking it up, basically looking at the duration for which they have held the tokens, which is one of the ways that I've seen this getting solved. But I would be also curious in how, what you think the ideal solution to this is.
So, okay, so you're talking about transparency wasn't that great an idea, was it? And then you get people with they're showing off their nouns and their bored apes. It's like, you really don't, and then, their POAPs, it's like if you've got a POAP that you're here and you've got a bored ape, your house is empty right now. Anyway, so it's a real, transparency isn't as cool as we thought it was. So I'm not going to deal with that because this isn't a ZK discussion or a transparency discussion, but I will relate to reputation and money. And why I'm talking about reputation fundamentally is that money is broken. It's an outdated system of resource distribution. And it's not a bad system of resource distribution, it's just outdated. And that's why so much of the allocation of the resources in the world is not done properly anymore, because it's so outdated. And you can see that in a project like yours or any of our projects. There's people who are quieter and might do more infrastructure work, and they're a little bit invisible, and they might get paid less than the marketing people or something who are loud. And basically, marketing people are paid to create information pollution. And so there's a high-paid information pollution people, or salespeople who are high-paid convincing liars, or, the whole system. And then, parents are paid nothing. So the monetary system is sort of fundamentally broken, which is why I've started to talk about reputation, because we need to start thinking about what is going to replace money. Probably not in the next 10 years, but we can start. And this industry has the ability to start. And that's why I talk about reputation, is because it's so messed up. And reputation fundamentally is composed of, I would guess, sort of something like two things. You can divide it different ways, but there's the facts, and then there's how I feel about it. So we might have had a monetary exchange where you paid for something, and you got a good deal, and we both felt it was fair. And we might have the exact same exchange where you paid for something, and I was just kind of impolite or something, and you felt it was a crappy deal because I was nasty to you or something. And it has nothing to do with the price. You can get something that's worth the money and still be like, I'll never go there again. So your feeling about reputation is different from the fairness. I got the thing, he gave me the money, it was, that worked out, but I didn't feel good. So it's kind of two things. And then there's also what I think about myself and what you think about me. But there are also facts. Did I show up on time or not? And did I give my presentation? And did I send them the slides on time? Those are all factual. Was it a good lecture? You guys get to decide. So the fact that so the amount of money in my bank account is really different than the amount of money I made over time. So the amount of money I made over time might in some way kind of represent the work I did. Like I said, my kids didn't pay me for the breastfeeding thing or anything, but in some way, right, in some way, the money in my bank account or the money over time could represent something, but you don't want to be completely transparent about that. And then it also might represent where I lived, because if I lived in a high-cost country or a high salary country versus a low salary country. Like it becomes incredibly meaningless incredibly quickly. And how much you pay people is like, should we pay people because they're like, everybody's had this debate, but they're in another country, and should I pay them? Like, everybody's had this debate. It becomes very meaningless very quickly, which is why reputation is sort of substituting for it. And the case you're talking about, one of the things that, it's actually one of my spare slides. We already got to my spare slides, because that's how these things go. Is ranks, something like 1 to 10, or, like judo, like has like yellow rank, whatever, expert, senior expert, something like that, so that if you think about weighting according to expertise, that there's just certain level you can get to, and that's the max. And that would allow you to have weighted voting that makes sense, and that doesn't expose how much people are making or how much they made over time, but at least shows their seniority. That's a pretty normal way to do it. And it can also degrade over time because, they haven't done anything for 2 years, maybe they forgot how to do it. So that kind of like ranking systems make a lot of sense for that. Yeah, so that's how I think about that. It's more like weighted ranking system. And the other thing you can do with ranking system is you can make decisions about power, like what is the multiple of power? Like the lowest guy gets 1 vote. What should the highest guy get? Should they get 100? Should they get 20? Should they get 3? And so you can create a weighted system in which nobody has more than 5 times more power than anybody else. And ranking gives you that ability. That doesn't exactly answer, but yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
Cool. Anyone else want to give an example? Like, we're having a conversation in which I talk more than you. Adam.
My use case is owners of a condominium building, and they come together, discuss things, make suggestions. So I'm interested in assessment of competency. That is, in this particular situation, some people come in like trolling, and some of them are actually mentally ill, and they want to destroy the community with some stupid comments. And it's not possible to ban them because they are owners of this building, so they have a right to speak. So I need a solution where I cannot ban them, but somehow the discussion still goes within a normal and constructive way.
Yeah. So, so you're talking about a governance system at this point, which happens to be what I'm good at. And what you're talking about is a regulatory system. Now, we've mixed up in our current modern life the difference between regulation and enforcement. So we're like, oh, you did tornado cash, we're going to enforce some law that instead of like ban it, or we're going to arrest you after you did something. That's enforcement. But regulation is, you know how doors never used to come off airplanes in midair? That was regulation, right? It just never happened because it was regulated before the act. And in your case, you want regulation, something like nobody can speak for more than 3 minutes in a row, nobody can speak more than 5 minutes in the conversation, something like that. Something that will just prevent them from going off. It's like your 3 minutes are up and you enforce it on everybody with like some basic rules. And then in terms of reputation, for what you're talking about, I mean, this is really interesting. Like, we have all these DAOs, we have all these ideas, we do something, and then it's like the reputation is, one of the things that we forget to do is problem definition. All right, we have a problem, whatever it is, the lawn isn't clean or something like that. And then we have some ideas, and then the question, it might be we hire somebody, or it might be everybody takes care of their own lawn, or it might be, we take turns, whatever. You might have a bunch of different solutions for that, and you've got to measure for the outcome. So we're pretty good at coming up with ideas, and we're okay at funding the best ones. We're okay at delivering what we said we would deliver, and we're really crap at measuring whether it succeeded. And our governments are really bad at measuring if it succeeded or not. It's like we've got anti-money laundering laws. How's that going? We're not stopping any of the money laundering, right? So in this case also, you might have a reputation score based on Do they give good ideas? Do they execute on the idea? And do their ideas actually solve the problem that they're supposed to solve? And in any DAO, you could do that. One of the things that is really interesting around credentials is you don't want to force people to show their on-chain credentials. But if you've received money on-chain from a DAO, I at least know you received it. It's like, I got money, the DAO allocated it to me, and if you said, in my DAO, at the end, we give you a verifiable credential so that it's secret to you, that says how you did. Did you deliver? Was it on time? Was it under budget? You know, did it solve the problem? So we give you these certifications. If you received money and you won't show me your verifiable credential, it's uncool. So you could actually have, like, keep your information about how you did secret, but I know that if you got money, you're supposed to at least have this validation certificate at the other end of how you did. So there's some way of, like, knowing the beginning and ending of things and, like, having one marker on chain, but the actual reputation off chain, so that you're not exposing people's personal data. But, you know, you have to think about how that works. It's not so easy, because as soon as I don't want you to know that I've screwed up, it's like, you took it off your resume. And again, you want to think a little bit about how different do we want these systems to be from reality? Like, people do take things off of their resumes, and they do make mistakes, and they do whatever. And so, like, we have this idea of, like, we're going to know the truth. And it's like we're all adults, right? I can tell you that there is no truth. You're not going to freak out or anything, right? So I try to think a little bit about, like, how, not ungaming it. Like, we don't want to prevent collusion. I love collusion. We call it collaboration if we like it, and collusion if we don't like it. Like, I like collusion and conspiracy. Again, we call it conspiracy when we don't like it, and cooperation, and, you know. So we don't want to prevent all these things that are normal in the normal world, like having one identity when I go home to my mom's place and another identity for cosplay. Like, that's cool, right? So we want to also a lot of the times, I think some of the things we're trying to implement in the area of reputation and zero knowledge and identity aren't reflections of our natural way of thinking of it. So we want to get a little closer to, like, that's pretty normal. Like, okay, you've got a college degree, you've also got your grades. Do you always show both? Well, you know, maybe for a year or two afterwards, you know, like something like that. Any other use cases people have? Okay. So here we go. Yeah, we have our dilemma aspect. So on-chain reputation, what could possibly go wrong? So does anybody here, like, raise your hand if you have something that you don't want other people to know about you, or at least you don't want everybody to know about you, right? So on-chain reputation, as we were saying, it's like how much money you made, whether you've got a Bored Ape, whether you're at home right now because you've got a POAP or whatever, you know, you made, like, if I bought coffee at the Bitcoin Cafe, like, we all know where I am. So on-chain reputation is really problematic, even POAPs. And it's like, I don't want people to know if I went to the Lesbian Republicans convention, because there's not one person who won't, you know, like, won't be pissed off at me about that. I might not want somebody to know I'm female. I might not want somebody to know I'm not. But if I were gay, or, like, whatever, maybe I do want everybody to know I'm gay. Anyway, so it's really a problem, and at some point it's almost always a problem. And so we have these things that I call non-transferable tokens, because I don't think that you can actually bind them to somebody's soul. I don't know why I don't think that. So non-transferable tokens, and you hear people, whenever you hear people talking about how non-transferable tokens are going to work, they'll be talking about, like, and then you use a ZK, and then you use a this, and it's a layer this, and it's anchored to that, and then you won't know. And it's like, just use verifiable credentials. Like, I don't think on-chain reputation is particularly great for most things, and you've made it really clear, like, who wants to know what everybody got paid, and, like, not great. And you can't undo it, like we can't undo the fact that we have it now. Just like I can't un-Google myself. I really would like to. The other thing that I think is really important to talk about is issuance versus interpretation. These a lot of times we see these getting mixed up together. So, but they're almost always separate. So there's something like you get a diploma in this case, and then an HR person interprets your diploma. The entities who issue your certificates and the entities that interpret your certificates are two different entities. And Gitcoin is sort of like that. So if you want to have Gitcoin Passport, they give you a score. It's a little bit opaque how they calculate it. I have a suspicion that if you have more GTC coins, you get a higher reputation. But most of the information that they take in, they didn't generate. They take in your like Twitter activity, that's issuance. They take in your POAPs, that's issuance. They take in all this stuff that happened. And again, some of it just happened, like I had money in my account or whatever, I got paid or whatever happened. I gave a Gitcoin grant last time, so it's an action I took, not an issuance. So it combines all these different things that are connected to issuance. I think that separating those two things is really helpful, right? So if you wanted to give ranks to the people in the weighted voting, you might take in information from multiple sources to give those ranks. Does anybody want to give their example that they were talking about before and talk about how issuance is either the same or different from the interpretation in their use case? People gave some cool use cases. Okay, I'm not going to force anybody to speak around here. Yeah, go ahead.
So in the context of mentorship,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I saw a few people slipping out. If you need to go see Vitalik, I won't be insulted. It's okay.
Yeah. So in the context of mentoring, I think, for instance, if I attended ETH Prague or ETH Berlin, this is a way to issue a certification in this case, but also how many mentees I have, or for instance, if I actually have recurrent mentees, that shows that yes, people are getting back to me afterwards. So you have multiple sources from the mentorship experience, but also from hackathons and spaces that you are creating in regards to education.
Yep. And the people issuing it is the person who got mentoring. You know, they could say helpful, not helpful, whatever. Yeah. So exactly. They're the issuers in some way. And in the back, and then you have privacy issues like, what am I going to say about my mentor if he knows I'm going to see it? Like, and also, this is a real problem with ratings. It's like you go to in an Uber and he has to be really rude for you not to give 5 stars because you know his living is dependent on it, even if he's not your friend. And it's the same here. Like I showed you the spa DAO at the beginning, right? It gets run by one of the guys who's an interviewer on the Bankless podcast. Like if I went there and it was uncool, it would be a very high cost for, I'm not saying it is, I'm sure it's a really cool spa event, just so you know. I really know absolutely nothing about it, but it's a good example because if I say anything, this is a really prominent person. So the anonymity of giving the reviews is, and like how do you do that if you had 2 mentees and you're like, they only mentored just me or 2 other people and it sucked, and I want to say it sucked, and they're going to see their rating. And
do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, there's different mechanisms you could do around it. Like, I don't know. Like, I do think that there is, when you're talking about reputation in that kind of very personal way, because I'm much more interested in group issuance, right? In some ways, like, does a group issue a certificate or not? Like Harvard issues you a degree. But on an individual level, you need rehabilitation or, you know, forgiveness or whatever like that. So it might be something like, if you get a poor rating, we have to sit down and have a talk about what's going on with you. And so sort of Ostrom's principles, and we don't like immediately ban you or immediately I mean, maybe you had a bad day, maybe you're, you know, we've all had that. And you try to mediate it. So if it's in that kind of case. I think this is one of the really important issues. because I was saying about the low fidelity issue, right? Like issuing some certificates and everybody gets a 5, somewhere between a 3 and 5, and then only positive certificates, you issue praise or you issue a NFT, it's all positive, but that's not what we're worried about. We're worried about the incidents of like the bad incidents. And I think right now we're a little bit far away from that, although because of the criticalness of the problem, it's probably one of the next things I'm going to be working on. But I think we have to start with the negative issuance in a very gentle way, like in a manual. I'm thinking about creating some sort of authority that you opt into, like crypto projects can opt into, and then if somebody has a complaint, they go there. And the same thing with the mentors, like if they have a complaint, they go to. I went to the graffiti workshop. That was the other night, and the person who organized it here asked me how it was yesterday. And I said, it was okay, but the woman who was running it was a total control freak, and she told us exactly what to paint and exactly what colors to use and whatever. And he said, that's funny, she said the exact same thing about you. It's like, the world is always a mirror, right? But again, he's trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. Right? That's not just a gossip thing. He's trying to make sure that next time it doesn't happen. He's not putting a sanction against me. He's not putting a sanction against her, but he checked in, how was it, with all the participants in order to create a human-based mediation system for next time. So you have to think about what needs to be done humanely and how your marks don't stay with you. When I was thinking about it, I've actually written if you look at my GitHub, I've actually written a whole certificate issuance architecture and also what I called negs and like how that might work. It's kind of a first ideation of how that might work. And basically if you issue a negative reputation for somebody, you also have to list like what would they have to do to make up for it. Because a lot of times if somebody does something bad to you and they say, oh, I'm sorry, right? Like in my case, like I'm not trying to hide the fact that I'm a little bit of a bitch. Like I could try, but it wouldn't work. But like if they're willing to say I'm sorry and make up for it, sometimes that's where your strongest friendships are. It's not the people who never screwed up, it's the people who screwed up and fixed it. So when you think about negative rating, that's one of the, and then do we have a mentor training program for that person? Maybe they need to do a communications workshop. Or like I said, maybe just something really, like they got fired the day before, who knows, right? Or rugged. So I do want to get into some of the tools and the approaches so that you can start to look at some of the things that there are right now. We've talked about some of them. These are things that do what I call activity analysis. So they take either on-chain, off-chain, or some combination of your activity, and they use that to give you some type of interpretation thing. Some of the problems with activity is that like in Orange Protocol, for example, or HyperCerts, an authority is issuing you a certification that you did the activity. I tried to read this AC/DC paper, like, I don't know, if you're a real geek, go for it. And some of them, like Collabland, is more like token gating. They're not issuing it, but if you have the token, they'll gate things for you. I can also make these available. And I'm also going to be putting out like a little bit of a report. I'm trying to work with one of the guys who I saw was putting out a report and put something out to the industry. But like, for example, Photrek is working with the Singularity Net. I just happen to know about them. It's not even something that's out there. And basically, they're looking at like how much activity did you do in their funding rounds. And there's all kinds of activities. Like you could have voted, you could have commented on somebody else's thing, you could have, whatever it is, right? And so how much activity you did, and then that increases your weighted voting. So now what you're doing is you're favoring people with a lot of time on their hands who maybe aren't as competent and don't, like, I don't have that much time. Like, how much time do I have to be, like, I did review a lot of them and I was on the review committee, but it's not, there's not a representation of competence with the amount of time you have, and it also creates ongoing centralization because as you have more weighted voting, because you've spent more time last time, you start to get higher and higher reputation, and so that's a centralization or aggregation function over time. So you have to be careful about, like, is contribution and appreciation are different. Like, thank you for coming is really different for thank you for changing my life. I'm so glad your talk was, great, or thank you for giving a talk. Those are so a lot of times in these systems, we're not doing a good job of separating that. Just looking at the time. Does somebody want to say about the activity analysis? Are you guys thinking about implementing it for you? It was like, okay, did you mentor? How much did you mentor? Anything like that? Anyone else thinking about activity analysis for their projects? Questions, answers, things to say that are smarter than what I said? Okay. The next one is work performed. These are much more about like the actual delivery of the work. So source cred, I think it's defunct now, but it would like look over your GitHub repositories and know what code you had submitted. And again, that's not necessarily work done in the case of GitHub, right? It's which of your code got committed. So it's a little closer to your code actually works, because you could have submitted something that didn't get a commit in GitHub. DWork, I've seen people use it for proof of hours worked, and DWork has some kind of certificates in them. I don't know if they're NFTs or verifiable credentials, but as you work, they can give you a role, and then it's like, okay, you did 10 hours, and then we can prove that you did it. It's kind of like a task board, like Wonderverse also. Like you take tasks, it's a little bit more like a task management. These are more like task management tools, but they're good at tracking who did the tasks and making sure that we know who did that. In some ways, the retroactive funding is like that, or Coordinape is a little bit like that. It's like, okay, I submitted to Optimism. Optimism also uses weighting voting, so if you're a delegate, you get more authority to say whether somebody did good work or not. And that's not a bad thing, although I think that in our industry, we've invented a politician class. Delegates at this point are professional politicians, and that's what they do. They go around being delegates at all the different things, and it's like, do we really want a professional politician class, and what does that lead? And if you're a really good delegate, does that mean you're actually a really good assessor of somebody's coding work, or somebody's marketing work, or somebody's whatever? I have some questions about that. You might be, like in this, we talk about how we've aligned our incentives, but most of us, like, the highest incentive isn't money. It's like, who are you cool with? Like, who's going to hire you next time? And like some of these very powerful delegates, none of us would say anything in public against them, because like they've got more Twitter followers and they've raised money, and if we ever go on a fundraising round, and so we're a little bit naive about what incentive means. And so, and again, this is starting to create centralization of power around a political class within Web 2 because of the way that we've designed our voting systems. And part of that is just a naive idea about what governance is, like governance is voting. That's very strange. It's not the case, but that's why I'm talking about reputation. Reputation is part of it. The information ecology is part of it. I won't go into governance. We could do that for days. And like I said, infrastructure work, like there's invisible work, and then also like the human work, like you'll hear women complain about this a lot. Like if there's a fight, the people who are in HR and have to intervene and get people to work together, it's completely invisible. And that doesn't get, validated on chain. Certificates, which I've alluded to, there's a lot of this right now. There's a lot of certificates. And I've talked a little bit about the pluses and minuses, but I think that there's something there clearly. But I do think there is a problem of like quality versus like, what does it actually mean? And one of the things I've been thinking about is that if we have a certificates that are being issued, we also need another layer of authorities that say which certificates are valid. So just like you have an accredited universities list, in a decentralized organization, you could have like, okay, the Ethereum Foundation puts out a list, and the Solana Foundation puts out a list, and I put out a list because I'm arrogant, and whatever, the Giveth House puts out a list of these are the credentials that we validated. And so you could issue whatever credentials you want, but in order to get on one of those 4 lists, you would need to actually have the credential mean something. And this would be fully decentralized because anybody could choose which list they believe. It's like, no, I'm going to go with the Giveth House list. Those guys are good guys. I'm blockchain for good. I'm going to choose the blockchain for good list. and not the Ethereum Foundation list. So it gives you the flexibility, or you could say, if you're not on all four of the lists, like, you're not good enough for me. So it gives that like extra layer of decentralization, of having some authorities around these credentials, which is really missing right now. Like, who issued, like, we all have to do our investigation of who issued the credential and whether we believe it. Some of them are transferable, some of them aren't. NFTs have the advantage of being transferable. Like, you can see them everywhere. Like, you can show them on chain. Verifiable credentials, not everybody has a wallet that supports that, and they have multiple standards, and it's a little bit more difficult there, but yeah, those are technical issues. Anyone issuing certificates or thinking about certificates as part of their, want to talk about certificates? People love POAPs. Somebody said that to me at the beginning of the POAP thing. It took me a year to be like, all right, now I love POAPs. I have so many POAPs missing in my wallet because I didn't love them soon enough. But yeah, the ones that are both Polygon ID and Disco XYZ, and to some degree also, I think, Orange Protocol are using verifiable credentials. Do people know the difference? Have people heard of verifiable credentials? Do people know what that is? No, okay. So we know what an NFT is. We know what a non-transferable NFT is. Yes, so far, okay. Before there was a blockchain, there was something called self-sovereign identity, which is a group of geeks who would meet twice a year in California. The famous one is Doc Searls. Identity Woman is a lot more active now. She's one of the top people in that area. And so Doc Searls and Identity Woman and a few other people established this thing called the self-sovereign identity thing, and OpenID is one of the results of that. But that got completely co-opted into Google because they could see 20 years ago, Harry Halpin, who's the founder of NIM, is also one of those people. They could see 20 years ago that if you don't have control of your identity card, I'm going to call it like your passport, like somebody else is going to capture all your data. And your identity on the internet it's a digital identifier. It's a string of numbers that says it's me. It's like, hi, I'm Grace. By the way, for those of you who know, that's not my legal name. That's not my given name. It's not my legal name. I go by Grace. But if I have to get payment, then I need to use my legal name. So I can go around saying I'm Grace, but that's, like my kids call me Mom. So that's like my digital identifier could be different for different contexts. Some people call me Mom, my mom calls me by my given name, and you guys call me Grace. And so I get to issue, if I can issue this name and tell you what to call me, that would be my ability to hold my own digital identifiers. And then when I do a handshake with you, I tell you the name I want to tell you. So that's what a digital identifier is. So that's one aspect of self-sovereign identity. And the other aspect is what's called VCs, or verifiable credentials, which is basically it's a JSON file that says this credential was issued at this time by this entity. And it's verifiable that it was issued by that entity. They had been talking about this stuff for 20 years, but they didn't have an anchor, because you would always need a centralized authority for your verifiable credentials and your digital identities. But when blockchain came around, they're like, now we've got an anchor. And so all of these things around self-sovereign identity only became functional when blockchains gave them a decentralized anchor rather than a centralized anchor. So now all of the technology around verifiable credentials, these are off-chain credentials, and you can decide how to hold them. So in the same way that when your university gives you a degree, you're holding a piece of paper, and the university may or may not have a database. Usually they do have a database, but nobody else has access to that. But you can show your degree anytime you want. That's how verifiable credentials should be functioning. So I've got my verifiable credential in my wallet. Maybe I back it up on IPFS or some other decentralized storage so that nobody else can access my credentials, and I've got them in my pocket, in my wallet in some way, and nobody else, that database, it doesn't exist anywhere else. Like the degree might be with the university, and the POAPs might be over here, and whoever, the issuer might keep them, the issuer might not keep them, but nobody can take them away from me, and nobody can inspect all of them. So that's how verifiable credentials could work. And so the ones that are using verifiable credentials are Disco XYZ, and Orange Protocol, I said, which isn't on this list, and Polygon ID. Those are the ones that I know are using also that standard, which is a Web 2 standard, but actually can't be implemented without Web 3. Yeah, and this one, the checked IO, I looked at it, and actually they're trying to do verifiable standards, credentials for data. Like this data's origin was over here, and this data's origin was over there. So it's a different kind of credentialing system, but it might be relevant for something like what you're doing. So knowing the actual origin of the data rather than giving a credential to a person, you could give credential to a data, or a datum. Okay. And then social graphs is another one that I've seen. Who's seen social graphs, like some of this technology, or tried to use it for reputation? Has anybody tried to use it for reputation? It looks cool, doesn't it? Like knowing who people are and whatever. You have to be really specific. Bright ID was using it for a while for self-sovereign identity as well, because your social graph, who you know is very individual, but also you can change it unlike your fingerprint. So like if your identity were exposed, Bright Idea had this idea that like, okay, I could erase my old identity and then another slightly different group of friends, and that my social graph is like a fingerprint, it's very different. But I could switch it, which I can't do with fingerprints. Together Crew is the only one that I've seen that's doing social graphs in a way that makes sense. And the way that they're thinking about it is, in any like network or community, there's different roles that need to be played. There's like expert roles. There's like the networkers who like go around from network to network. There's the like party people who are like, hey, let's do this, let's do that, who keep the cohesion together. And so they've identified 4 or 5 different roles, and they can do an assessment of your Discord or your Telegram or whatever you've got that says, listen, your community's not that healthy because you're missing these roles. And that's the only use that I've seen for social graph that I really know. This Now IS, he was like looking at, it was really interesting, he was looking at expertise in this way. And I saw recently another one, I can't remember who was doing it, like, if we know that these people, like if we know that Vitalik follows you, then maybe, you know, like something like that. If we know that a known expert is following you or, you know, recommends or loves your tweets, again, this tends towards centralization of power. Like, so it's not great. Your data sources are really important. And the other thing is it's like slightly dystopian, like who do you know and who don't you know? And like, as I was saying before, like I have a different personality at home and in my cosplay world or in my Ethereum world. Like, I don't know how many of you talk about this stuff at your family gatherings, like, like, so your social graph is like not one thing really. So it has a little bit of a weird feel, but I could imagine it as an input thing. Competitions, we're having a hackathon. If you've won a competition, Joke Race, David was saying a really interesting thing about this. Like, you can use ranked voting as a reputation system. So you might not have come in first, but if Vitalik voted for you, that's an on-chain thing. Vitalik voted for this proposal. It might have been the losing proposal, or it might be these guys come in second place all the time. They never come in first, but they always come in second. Maybe we need to do something there, right? So you could actually use whether people have voted for your proposal in a DAO as part of your reputation. So I think it's a really interesting, I mean, whatever David Phelps at Joke Race is always saying, interesting stuff like that. So that actually is an input that we haven't thought about much, but you know. And wisdom of the crowd. And again, these are ones where people, after the fact, tell you what they think. So it's like, there's this praise, you can buy these praise as a service. So if people are like, oh, thank you for, you know, tweeting, thank you for this. And so the people over time are giving you appreciation and then Coordinate. At Coordinate, they do this every month, right? So they have their base pay and then a bonus pay pot. And then they say who they think was the greatest. And again, these have pluses and minuses. And again, like I was saying before, appreciation versus actual use of a tool. Oh, that's it? I mean, I have 4 more slides, but we're at time. Thanks. Do we have time for one question? I mean, we've kind of gone through a lot of stuff in between, but no. All right, cool. I took all the questions up front. That was fun. Thanks, everybody.